Hey guys, this is CeeGee with CardRunners.com, and I'm bringing you guys another open-faced Chinese video. Since I made the last kind of intro to Chinese, open-faced Chinese video, I've played a lot of different hands, gained a lot more experience, so I feel a little bit more confident in explaining some of my reasoning to certain ways to set hands. And I felt like the best way to kind of teach you guys how to think about setting hands is just to go through some hand samples, and I just essentially took a deck of cards and dealt out hands of Chinese and thought about how I would set them for different reasons. And I found out that there's obviously multiple ways of setting hands. Figuring out the EV of certain ways of setting is a little bit trickier with some of the math, but there is actually some math being tossed around for different situations, like how to set certain drawing hands on the bottom, and what the EV is of doing that, and what are the probabilities of you making certain hands. I'm going to try and address as much of that as possible, but for the most part, I think a lot of my reasoning for setting hands certain ways comes simply from logic, and you'll see throughout the hand that I provide mostly good reasons for doing what I'm doing, and hopefully you guys will learn something from the set of hands that I pulled out. So let's just get into it. I started off dealing myself hands, and this was the first one, Ace Queen 10 7 2. And when looking at hands initially, there's a lot of concepts that go through my mind. Building from the bottom up is probably going to be the first concept that I'm going to focus on. So starting with any kind of strength in the hand and setting it bottom is generally going to be a good idea. There are ways of balancing hands by setting, a decent strength bottom, medium strength middle, and then whatever top. But for the most part, if you want to play a more safe and well-rounded strategy, putting most of your strength bottom is going to be the best way to do it. A hand like this is actually a little bit interesting because it provides us an alternative of setting Ace Queen 10 on the bottom, which is usually going to be the norm, with the 3 flush that you're presented. And it's actually an interesting situation if you're out of position, because you are a favorite to make a flush if you have all your cards live with the 3 flush, and the royalty points for making a flush actually are pretty good. So you can set it Queen 10 2 of clubs on the bottom, Ace in the middle, and then possibly putting the 7 in the middle or top. Generally, I'm going to put 7 in the middle, and I'll explain why when we get there. But I think that's one of the ways to set the hands, and I'll show you kind of how I set up a slideshow here. This was the first way that I talked about, putting Ace Queen 10 and then 7 deuce. This is more of kind of like a safe route. However, I think it might be slightly negative EV because of the possibility of making the 3 flush. Although it is a lot more of a chance to foul if you do put the 3 flush bottom and ace high middle. However, there are kind of like bailout cards like the Queen and the 10, which are pretty valuable bottom. So it's not really a big deal if you have an ace high middle and queen high on the bottom at the moment, because you can build your hand strong later on. So it really depends on how well you can confidently set your hand on later streets, and what kind of cards you catch. That's obviously going to build your hand. So there's this way of setting it, and then there's this way of setting it. I really don't like putting the 7 on top now that I look back at this. I made this slideshow probably a month ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, and I definitely am not a big fan of putting 7 up top. I would definitely put it in the middle at this point. Putting weaker cards up top can be okay. I think I would be more happy putting deuces and 3s up top than like 4s through 10s, because there's decent value to be had in making pairs of like 6s or 7s or 8s in middle, and you often don't really enjoy hitting a 7 off the bat here if you have the possibility of making a pair of 7s. So it does kind of prevent you from building strength from the bottom up, which is the general concept that I ascribe to now. So I would say putting the 7 in the middle is probably a better decision than putting it up top.